This is Pastor Dave Taman from Cayman International Assembly. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. At CIAG, we like to say that we do church differently. So today, and for the rest of this week, I'm joined by my good friend Dane Ramoon. Dane has been a vital part of our ministry at CIAG for the past year and a half, and many of you may recognize Dane's voice as a popular on-air personality of one of the secular radio stations here in Cayman. Dane, welcome to Ignite.
Thank you.
You're relatively a new Christ follower, aren't you?
Yes, well, still new. It hasn't passed a year yet, so I still am considered new.
Well, there are a lot of folks who may be listening this afternoon on their way home who, they've had to deal with the issue of whether or not to become a Christ follower. And I was wondering if you would be able to just to share a little bit of your story with them as to how you became a Christ follower and some of the things that that meant for you, and especially in the first days.
How do I start it off? It's basically, I would say, hard times brought me to God. And it would be something to be embarrassed about at first, to say that hard times, but meaning that things weren't going how I wanted it to go in my life. And then every time I turned around, there was always something bad and negative that was happening to me. And at that time, I met a great friend of mine by the name of Stanford, and Stanford actually attended church with you and helped you a great amount at church. And he brought me into a church service after asking me, I think, 20 times. And I showed up to church late that day. I think it was a half an hour into the service. It was almost done. And he introduced me to you, which you were talking about the new initiative that you were at the time putting together. And I don't know. They always say that whenever you go somewhere for the first time and you always feel like your life is impacted, you felt like the pastor at that time was talking to you. And it doesn't matter how many people were in that building, the message was directed at you. And that's what I said to myself a lot of the times. And the message to me was very powerful. And I think at the time he was talking about letting go of the things that you think that are important in your life and focusing on the one person that's always faithful and always has your back. And that's when I decided around those times that I really wanted to explore more about who this powerful being was, this man that made us, our dad. I refer to him as my dad, and learn more about him. And I hanged around a little bit more around church. And just to make a long story short, I went to church with you. Got more into the ministry and learning about God. And yeah, there was too many amazing things in my life that happened.
So what you're saying, what I'm hearing you say, is that this was a process in your life that brought you to a point. And
it was, yes.
And it wasn't the very first time that you had been approached that
No.
you decided that, okay, I'm going to throw everything to the wind and make this decision. So eventually you broke down and you came and you heard a message that had an impact in your life.
Yes.
And it began to draw you in. And perhaps there are folks listening that have experienced that. They haven't reached that point where they have made that commitment and made the decision to accept Christ. What would you say to those folks that are on the fence, that are trying to come to grips with that drawing of their heart? What would you say to them?
Easy. I can only speak to. I feel like I can only speak to people in my age demographic because I'm one of them, and hopefully there's somebody that's saying to themselves, "No, you're also speaking to me." But one of the things I found out, what I did not want to become a Christ follower before, was because I said, "No, I got too much of life to live. I got so much more partying to do. I got so much more concerts overseas to visit. I want to be comfortable in front of my friends and speak the way that they're speaking." And you know what? You said something to me in I think it was a class at the time. It was like a gathering we had, and you said, God will begin to change the things that you think that was once important in your life, and then you realize that they're just not important anymore. And that's what happened with me. Like, I find myself like turning away from everything, like slowly putting the favorite songs that I love on my iPod from God. So I was slowly moving away from the hip hop that I was fond of. I started to preach more to myself. I started to pray more. And
when you say preach, that doesn't mean that you got behind the pulpit.
No, preach meaning that every time, it's weird. Every time I see something that goes wrong, I always have this saying where I said, for this I also have Jesus. And then I speak to myself. It doesn't mean I'm insane, it just means I'm having a conversation with God. So the proper word is to pray. Right. I pray to God, or have a conversation with God. And yeah, just parties became non-existent. It didn't matter if I was there or not anymore. Matter of fact, it was a place I never wanted to be anymore. It just became like, what am I doing here? So it was reversed. At one point, I would find that church to me was boring, and now I found that the club life was boring, and going out and partying in church was where I really wanted to be. So it reversed. God reversed it.
Now that's pretty amazing, because that was not necessarily something that you said, okay, today I'm going to change the way I feel about this. It was just something that God began to do in your life, and it was a process. And did you expect that all of those things would happen the way that they did, or was it a surprise?
No, there's a lot of times I laughed at you. There's a lot of times.
A lot of people do that.
Yes, sometimes. I'm like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I can't get rid of this hip hop. I can't stop the club. I never told you that you had to get rid of hip hop, did I? No, you didn't. You never said that once. I think your very advice was, I'm trying to remember exactly what you said, but you never told me to change my lifestyle. At one point, no point did you tell me to do that, and that's what made me feel relaxed and wanted to try exactly what you said. I think it was more like make a conscious decision on what is right from what is wrong, and that's what you always said. You know, if I'm going to listen to the music and make it influence me, and that's what I'm creating a sin. But there's nothing wrong with listening to the music I like listening, because there's a lot of things I came to you and asked you, and then you guided me in the right direction, and it's true. Like, you know, and I really feel from a young person's standpoint coming to you, and you not telling me you can't listen to hip hop, you can't go to the club anymore, you can't, everything was can't. You actually sold me on why I need to be involved with this.
Well, of course, there was something that I said a few times that I've heard you repeat that you got a kick out of, and and I think you know what I'm referring to. It has something to do with fishing.
Yeah.
As one of the things that we learn from the scriptures is that you can't clean a fish before you catch it.
Yeah.
And so we can't expect that we have to get our lives in order and everything straightened out in our lives before we can come to Christ. And I think a lot of folks struggle with that I could never go to church, I can never do this because I can't change.
Yeah.
And so what I've been hearing you say this afternoon is that the change really came as a process of the choice that you made, and that God began that process in your life, and that's what has happened in your life. It's been a God thing.
Yeah.
And not so much where you sat down and said, this is a list of things I've got to change this week in my life.
That's correct. That's correct. It wasn't instant at all. And, you know, I struggled a lot. I picked up the phone and I called you a lot. And I prayed a lot about my struggles. And I, at one point I felt like I didn't even deserve, I don't think I ever told you this, I didn't deserve to be a part of what God had to offer, because I was screwing up so much. But then, the reason I didn't even bring it up to you is because I was reading more and listening to the Word of God through Christian music and just Christian stations. And there was this one thing that came on that said that God is always forgiven.
Now, was that a natural process for you to read spiritual things or to listen to Christian radio? Was that something that was something you had done before, or
no?
So
never.
So that was something that just began to develop as a desire in you.
Desire, yes. It was weird, right? Because you're gonna laugh at this, or you're gonna think like something is wrong with me. But I always just say, man, I can't be in heaven. There's no way I could take the music. I always said that. There's no way I could take the music. And then, it changed me. Like, I am honestly, at the moment right now, we're putting together this great Christian album. Who would have told me 15 or 18 years that I would have been putting together a Christian album, or even liking the music that's out right now? Yeah. So it's Newsboys, Mercy Me, two of my favorite bands, and I constantly always in repeat, and even my son is in tune to them. Like he's always asks me, play that God's Not Dead song. Every time I place it on, he wants to hear it over and over again.
But I think there's a misconception that because something is Christian, and I put that in quotation marks, that lacks quality. But of course, we know that God really puts a higher standard on us, so we try to put out material that is of high quality.
Yes.
And so that's a misconception that a lot of people have until they start listening, and then it kind of surprises them. So what else would you like to tell those folks who might be considering that decision today in their own life?
Just what you have done and like have told me. And one of the things is a lot of people right now, if you're driving home whenever you listen to this message, or you're sitting at home and you're listening to it, you might think that it's just not for you. And a lot of people have told me that, because I make it like part of my mission that every time I sit down with someone, I have to bring it up in some ways. And I never bring it up like as referred to as like putting it or rubbing it into your face. Like I'm better than you, because I'm not. And I always like to tell people that I said, this is what happened to me. This is how amazing it is. And this is why I know he exists. Now, you can take my message from what I said to you, because I never end it by saying, come along. Never say that. I always feel like whatever I said to you should be enough to make you want to come along. I even say certain things like, please come to church with me once. What do you have to lose? And just come and listen to the word. If it impacts you the way that it impacts me, I'm going to be there for you all the way. And I say it to people even that don't show up. I'm still always with them. But yeah, I mean,
well, for you, it took a process.
It was a long process.
A number of invitations before you actually
very
showed
long
up.
process. And that
so don't give up.
person never gave up on me. Never. I think I went to lunch with you and Stanford at one point. I want to say it's you and Stanford, and I didn't even show up to church for like 5 weeks after that meeting. And I thought I was pretty serious at that time, but at the time that I really went, like I couldn't escape it. It kept on drawing me in. So it was like, it was meant for me to do it. But my biggest struggle was I was not ready. And that's what my advice to you right now, listening, you have to realize, like that saying that he says that I always laugh about, you can't clean a fish before you catch it, is so true. Come as you are. Like that is just not a word that we use. You have to come as you are, because that's the way that he wants you. That's the way he's going to fix you. And that's how you're going to feel the most amazing impact from your life. You know,
that's also a good point for those who are Christ followers and who have friends that they are inviting. You know, what you've shared is really important for them to understand that you can't give up on the first 2 or 3 invitations to someone. Keep on them, continue to pray for them, and in the right timing, that message will hit home, and they're going to respond. And that's when God can do something in their lives. And it's been a wonderful thing to watch what God has been doing in your life, and how you have gone through a process. And I've been very privileged to watch as your pastor, watch as you've been growing, and to see your family respond as well. So throughout this week, we're going to be talking about a variety of issues relating to this, but we're out of time for today. But I want you to join us tomorrow as we continue our conversation with Dane. We'll be focusing on some of the challenges that face new Christ followers.
Cayman International Assembly meets each and every Sunday morning in the Regal Movie Cinemas at Camana Bay. Our service or program begins promptly at 10 a.m. and lasts for 70 minutes. As I said at the beginning, we do church differently. We invite you to dress casually and come expecting a different kind of church experience. We present an uncompromising message in a contemporary and relevant way. You can find more on our website, CIAGKY.com.